We're doing Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abbreviated Code of Jewish Law, chapter 81. We're up to number 3. So we'll do a brief recount from last week. Okay. So we'll hopefully make it a little bit simpler than it seemed. We so far we said that there's 4 types of reshus, 4 types of domain on Shabbos. Until now, we discussed 2 of them. First one is reshus hayachid, that's normally translated as private domain, but essentially means a domain where the public doesn't go through. It's cut off from the public. So not private ownership, but private that the public can't get there. So the definition of Rashu Rabbin is a space that's at least 4 by 4 tefachim square. Remember, the fist is a tefach, so 4 by 4 square, and it is separated from the surrounding area by something 10 tefachim high. So it could be a fence, 10 tefachim high. It could be it's a mound, it's like some type of cliff or drop. It could be that it's 10 tefachim deep. So you can have a space in a trench or a pit that's 4 by 4 tefachim wide and is 10 tefachim deep. So any of those things make a reshus hayachid. So it's closed in and closed in by mechitza, some type of partition or walling, 10 tefachim high, and it's a space 4 by 4 tefachim. So that's the reshus hayachid. Then we had Rashu Rabbin. Again, normally translated as public domain, but it can be privately owned. That public doesn't mean ownership. The public means that it's a public thoroughfare. The people go through. So this has to be 16 amas square. One amma is, it's from the elbow to the fingertip. So it's 16 amas square is approximately 24 feet. So approximately 24 feet square minimum size. And it has to be open to the public. And we said that according to most views, you have to have 600,000 people go there each day. So that is a Rashu Rabbin. Any questions on that before we go further? No, we're all good.
Could you just repeat the one before it briefly in terms of size?
Yeah, the Rashu hayachid is at least 4 by 4 tefachim. This is a tefach. 4 by 4 tefachim square. That's the area of the place. It can be much larger. That's the minimum. And it has to be separated either by a fence or a drop, or it's raised by a height of 10 tefachim. So 10 tefachim is approximately 40 inches. So if you had a fence that high around it, or it was in a trench that deep, or was top of a little mountain type thing, so that is Rashu hayachid. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So Gimel. Number 3. Sorry. Number 4, I should say. We finished number 3 last week. Number 4, a Zohel Carmelis. So what is a Carmelis? So at the end of the halacha, we're going to explain that the word Carmelis essentially means neither here or there. So it's not a Rashu hayachid, it's not a Rashu Rabbin. We're going to see that it comes from literally. It means not wet and not dry. But, in English, we're saying neither here or there. As they, what's the saying? What do you get when you cross a chicken with a rabbit? Nish the hen, nish the hare. Right? Anyway, you will always have to have at least one bad joke in each year.
Not a bad joke. Cute. It's cute.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
All right. So Eza Carmelis. What is a Carmelis? So it's Makim Shein Hiluch Rabbim. The Rabbim, it's a place where it's not so much a public thoroughfare. Now it's not closed off with a fence like the Rishus HaYochid is, but it's not a road, it's not or a square or a highway, it's not somewhere where the public really goes. The Gam Eina Makif Mechitzes Koroi, and it's also, it may be fenced, but not properly. It's not properly fenced. Now, probably most Carmelists we have today are not fenced at all, but even has some type of fence. When we said that the Rishus HaYochid, the fence has to be 10 tefachim high, approximately 40 inches. So this Carmelist might have, 9.9 tefachim or lower. So it's not properly fenced. We're going, so for an example, sadois, fields. So fields are open, but the public doesn't really walk through the fields. It's not like the road. The nahar or river, the amakal kalapachas, the sar tefachim, that's at least 4 tefachim deep. The rachav kalapachas arba tefachim, it's at least 4 tefachim wide. So it's not really, if that river bed was dry and it was 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim wide, then it would be a Rishus HaYochid. But it's you can't really walk through it. You can't hang out there. Another example, Mavoyots, she'ein lehem shalosh mechitzes, sheyesh lehem shalosh mechitzes, an alley that ends up with 3 walls, like a dead end alley. So you got the fences on either side, and then a dead end. It's tavanos. Now we don't really have these so much today. It defines it in the brackets. So they used to have, and the next one also, to find the two of them together, they used to have little marketplaces. So, although the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was written in the 1800s, but a lot of the halachas, they borrowed the terminology from the Talmud. So if you think about Roman times, so they used to have a big open town square or roads, and they had pillars. Well, these pillars around it, and just outside the pillars, they had like a open air market type things. So there was 2 areas there. There was the one where the stock was displayed, and in front, between the pillars and the stock, was a place where the merchants would sit. So where the merchants sat, because of the pillars, it was you didn't have the same public thoroughfare. There was the pillars blocking, and then where the merchandise was is normally elevated slightly, and it was even more difficult for people to traverse through. But it was on the side. So the first one is where the merchant sat. So it's the bonus. The itztaba, and the itztabas where they actually displayed the merchandise. Which is just in front of the pillars of the Rashu Rabbin. Now it's 4 wide, and it's 3 tefachim high. It's a little bit elevated off the ground, or yos or more, at a sar tefachim until, if it got to 10 tefachim high, somehow there was a big, was on another level, was elevated, then it might become Rishus HaYochid. But it was between 3 and 10 high, and you have this space at least 4 wide. So all these areas that are open areas, but you don't have maximum public thoroughfare. So most of our streets today, I'm not talking about like main highways or freeways, but let's say suburban roads would also be in this situation. It's a little residential neighborhood street, it's wide enough, it's big enough, but you don't really have so many people going there. It's not a thoroughfare. Most people don't turn down a little suburban street unless that's your destination. No one travels through it. So the same as we mentioned this in the introduction, if you had a place that's 4 by 4 wide, so if it was high enough, it could be a Rishus Yochid, private domain, but the fencing or its ground level is not high enough. It's not 10 high. So an example of this, and or it's just another case, but the tail yesh by arba arba the gavur mishloisha barasara. They have a hill, a mound. So the mound
Doesn't have enough money.
The mound is 4 by 4 wide, but
He's not at Heiruti.
It's not high enough. It's between 3 and 10 tefachim high. And the reverse, we have a pit that's the ground at the bottom of the pit, 4 by 4 wide, and therefore, if this pit was 10 tefachim deep, it would be a Rishus Yochid, but this pit instead is between 3 and 10 tefachim deep. So it's only a carmelist. Right, so turn 2 pages at once. And there's many other examples of carmelis. Now, the Loshen carmelis, who Loshen rachmal. Carmelis means it's an abbreviation of rachmal. What does that mean? Peirus, this means loy lach v'loy yavush, not wet, not dry. Elabainin, it's like in between somewhere. Right, so as we said, the beginning means neither here or there. So it's not Rosh Yochid, not Rosh Rabbin. So here also, we're talking about an area, it's not Rosh Yochid, it's not a private domain, because it doesn't have the proper fencing. The Gamlo Rosh Rabbin, it's also not a Rosh Rabbin, a public domain, because it's not a thoroughfare. You don't have enough people going through it. It's not open enough. So as we said today, practically speaking, it's all our suburban area. Now, carrying on Shabbos, which means carrying 4 amos, distance of 4 amos, is forbidden. D'oraisa, it's a Torah prohibition in Rashu Rabbin. But rabbinically, it's also a carmelis, right? Because a carmelis is so similar. So if we use an example of a regular street that we have, suburban street, and one end that goes to, for example, the main road. So if people think they can carry in the street, so they'll keep carrying when they go around the corner, potentially, God forbid. So therefore, the sages have made that the carmelis, because it's so similar to Rosh Rabbin, we can't carry. However, since it is rabbinical, when we get to it, the laws of an Erev, to close or at least symbolically close an area and to carry, are far more lenient in a carmelist than Rosh Rabbin. And so pretty much the city Erev and the type of Erev we have in most places today are only good because it's really a carmelist. A place that say, last week we give an example like Manhattan, let's say Broadway or something, which is really Rosh Rabbin. To make a proper Erev, you have to actually literally close it off. You'd have to install gates, city gates like they used to have, and close the gates at night. The type of Erev we have in most places, wouldn't work. Okay. Any questions on the carmelists? No? Okay. Hey, number 5. Ezehu Mokum Patur. What is a Mokum Patur? Mokum Patur literally means a place with no like obligation. And before we go into it, we're essentially
I didn't hear what you said, Rabbi. A place where?
There's no obligation. So essentially it's everything left over after the last three. So it says Kol Mokim Rashu Rabbin, any area inside a Rashu Rabbin, She'ein by Arba al Arba, and it's not 4 by 4 tefachim wide. But it's higher than 3 tefachim. So because it's higher than 3 tefachim, it's not considered part of the ground. But it's not 4 by 4 wide. So it doesn't have any significance. So let's say the top of a pole. Or boish ein ba arba la arba, or you have a pit that's not 4 by 4 wide at the bottom. It's just a hole. It's a very narrow pit. But the depth is more than 3 tefachim. So again, it's not considered just a little ditch in the ground. It's deep enough to have be its own area, but it's not wide enough. Its space is enough to give it significance. So that's a mokum patur. In other words, it doesn't fit in anything else. It doesn't have the significance to be part of anything else. Likewise, any area that's not 4 by 4 square, and it has some type of fencing, or it's raised, or it's deep. Now, all of these only become a mokum patur if they're in a Rashu Rabbin. So let's say you have the freeway, and on the freeway there is a pole holding up a sign that this is exit 25. Okay, so this is a major freeway. There's 600,000 people go every day. You've got this pole. Let's say it's, might even be much higher than 3 tefachim, the pole, but it's more than 3. But it's only, how big's a pole? Like a, 2-inch diameter or something. It's a small. It's not 4 by 4 tefachim. Lucky if it's one tefach square. So the top of it is a mokum patur. But this is only if it was located in Rashu Rabbin, like the highway. I will imheim bekarmelis, hari gam came bekarmelis. If this pole is inside a karmelis, then it's just considered part of the karmelis. Okay. Now we probably don't have too many mokum patur that are actually practical, relevant. As I said, most of our suburban streets are probably karmelis. Major highways and main roads are Rashu Rabbin. Major place like Times Square, they have huge amounts of people. And then all the fenced off areas or the closed off areas are Rashu Yochid. Any questions on that? Yes. Over.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what happens with such a reshus like Times Square, and all of a sudden it's put into a situation because of the virus where there's 90% less people, let's say for periods of time. So does a reshus change?
So that's a good question. Now, a place like that, where you still have so many people there, even if they're not in the area, but you still have in the surrounding areas in those streets. But let's say everyone moved out. So Manhattan, as we said, I think when we first started this topic, Manhattan, because it's not just that it's an island, but it's got a drop all around it, pretty much. So it's like it's walled by 10 tefach with 10 tefach wall. with the wall going down as opposed to up. Now, before it became New York City, when they bought it for a few little trinkets, essentially, the amount of people that lived there, you could have made an Eruv, you could have all made a Rishus Yachid, the whole place. Because the amount of people there, it's an issue. So now we're in that general area, still have that amount of people, that maybe not all having these large crowds at one time like they did. So it's pretty much going to stay the same. But if everyone would leave, permanently, meaning 30 days, for 30, then it would, it could change. That would really be like a dystopian future, empty Manhattan, but or at least not 600,000 people. All right. Now that we have these, general sort of rules in mind, we can go on to chapter 82, Siman Pei Base, and this is what difference it actually makes of each rishus, and we'll make it a little more practical for us. So, Isa Vara Baitzam Rashu Rabbin. This is the prohibition of moving things within a Rishus Rabbin and from in and out of the Rishus Rabbin. Aleph. Number 1, the Rishus Rabbin, the Carmelis, also the Taltal Shundava Arba Amis. In a Rishus Rabbin or the Carmelis, you're not allowed to move, to carry something 4 amas. 4 amas, approximately 6 feet. You can't do that. Bain the Seis is whether you're carrying it, oisoi. Bain Lizraik, whether you throw it. Bain the Hoishid oisoi, or you hand it over, or kick it, pass it, push it, slide it, whatever it is. The Taltula Eza Amin Pokas Poks Marba Amas, Gami awesome. Now, to move it bit by bit, less than 4 amas at a time, is awesome. However, I'm going to, we'll just mention an exception. So whether with the kids or the grandkids, or Baruch Hashem, the beginning of the shir, we got a Mazel Tov, a great-grandchild. So you may have had a situation where you're outside and there's not an Eruv, and the kid is not moving. They're refusing to walk or move anywhere. Anyone ever had that?
Yes.
Yes. So obviously, in the first instance, we try and coax them, we try and get them to come, we try and do something. But if it doesn't work, you can move them bit by bit. Or if Shabbos is almost over, maybe you just wait there till after Shabbos. But in a situation where you can't really hang around, you don't have to leave the child, right? Even though I know some people are thinking about it during the tantrum. I'm going to go and leave them here. No, that's a shame. But don't leave the child. But you could move them a small amount at a time, less than the amount. So that would be an example. But generally speaking, even though the malacha, right, it goes back to the Mishkan, because when they would load the wagons, when they took the tabernacle, the Mishkan apart, they passed it over from one wagon to another wagon. They were 4 amas apart. So that was the transferring in that space 4 amas. That is the malacha. That's the biblical malacha. So less than that technically isn't a biblical prohibition, but we don't do less than that anyway. We're not allowed to. Can't do bit by bit unless it's an extreme situation. So base, number 2.
A rabbi.
Yeah.
How is there any type of amount of time that takes place between steps? I had this with my 3-year-old. So I would take a step, wait, then take a step, wait. So my question is, how fast can the steps be, or how slow should the steps be? Should there be like a Shalom Aleichem Rebbe in between
No,
steps? Or
it would be better to put them down between each step or two.
he was sleeping?
Yeah, that's the problem. Well, maybe you have to sit down. Go down. Well, see, there is discussion as to whether when you stand still between walking. So, all right, so let's go back a step. I've got a step ahead of us. To do this malacha of either transferring from one, say, Rashu Rabbin, or vice versa, or carrying something for Amos in the Rashu Rabbin, there's essentially three parts of the malacha. There's the picking up of the object. There's the actual transferring, either for Amos in Rashu Rabbin, or from domain to domain, which might be less than 4 Amos if it's domain to domain. And then there's the putting down. We actually ground the object. If someone didn't pick it up, someone else gave it to them, already lifted off the ground, or they don't put it down the various things, they've only done half the malacha. Now, you're not allowed to do half a malacha, but it's not a complete malacha. So, in a situation, let's say you have a child, we'll make it a little bit simpler. They're not asleep. They're just, God forbid, you should never know these things. It's twisted his ankle, his ankle is crying, I don't know, whatever it is. Can't leave him there. Then you would pick them up, take a step or two, make sure it's much less than the 6 feet, so not to be, even though in theory you could go almost to the limit, but to avoid any possibilities. Then you put the child down. So there's been a pickup less than the amount you need to go and put down. So then when you pick it up again, it's starting all over again. So there is some discussion about whether if you just stood still, is that like putting down? Like have you placed something down? But generally something in your hands doesn't really count unless you would probably have to put the baby down somewhere. Again, presuming it's all safe and various things. There are certain areas one might find themselves, God forbid on a Shabbos, you got to get out of there really smart, really quick. It's not safe and potential, God forbid, of life-threatening situation. Right? You just get out of there. Or someone has an injury, God forbid, you pick them up, you just get them out of there. But when it's not any of those issues, just a matter of, you can't leave the baby behind, and it's not going anywhere. So then, this you pick up, go less than the amount, put down, pick up. That would how we do it.
Rabbi,
Yes.
is the mother allowed to have the baby in a pouch on her back, or?
Yeah, no, that's carrying. That's considered carrying. Anything that you're taking the weight. Well, in general,
Okay on Shabbos?
Well, when there's no Erev, then that would be carrying. You couldn't do that on Shabbos. If you live in a place where there's an Erev, then you can carry, and it's not a problem. Right. So in general, carrying means not only your hands, it means things in your pockets.
Okay.
Even food in your mouth.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. And again, in a normal way of carrying. So again, we'll discuss if it's an abnormal way of carrying, then it's rabbinically prohibited, although it might not be biblically. So again, under certain circumstances, it could be lenient. We'll get to that. Okay, base number 2. So number 1 was we can't transport, either carrying, throwing, or passing something 4 amos, approximately 6 feet, in the public domain. Number 2 is also the say so lizroik You can't carry or throw or hand over, transport anything Reshus HaYachid, Reshus Rabbin, or the Karmas out of a Reshus HaYachid, out of this private domain, into the public area. The Chaim Reshus Rabbin, or the Karmas, Reshus HaYachid, or vice versa. Right. So and again, when there's an Eruv, that's different. But we're talking about when the place there's no Eruv, so you can't take anything out of the private area. So carrying house keys, etc. Avo, however, Mokum Patur, if you have a Mokum Patur, this place that doesn't fit any category, and we're going to give an example in a moment. You can transfer from this Mokum Patur to a Rishus Yachid or to Rishus Rabbin Makamlis. And likewise, you can transfer from those areas into the Mokum Patur. Right? As long as you aren't transferring for Amos in the public area. So an example might be you might have a little ledge or something near your door where you keep your keys, the house keys, or you keep it in the pot plant. I mean, I know they're all the obvious places we're not meant to do that, but in concept, the pot plant, you got to make sure if you took the key out of there, you're not moving the plant because the muksa. But let's an area that's 3 tefachim off the ground. It's not 4 by 4 square. It's a little something. They have lock boxes for keys. All right. So let's say so it's if your door goes right to most often a front door is set back into the property a little bit, and in the Rishus HaYachid already. But if your door goes straight to the Rishus Rabbin or the Karmelis, and you have the lockbox, so then you could transfer from this little Mokum Patur straight into the keyhole. Now, since there's a lot of differences, the quite complex differences between exactly is this area Rishus Rabbin, Rishus Yachid, is it a Karmelis? Therefore, so since it's not so simple, therefore, in a city where there's no Eruv, someone who's not an expert in these laws, they should be careful not to carry any article, any object from the place where it rests into another domain, only into an area where it's clear to you that you can carry there. Right. So, we gave the example of keys. So people who don't live in an Eruv, you can wear your key. Right. So an example of wearing a key as opposed to carrying a key. So a lot of people, they nickname it the Shabbos Belt. So what do you do? Essentially take one of those pieces of elastic and, the little, what do you call them? The little metal bits that go on a keychain, that hold the key. And you tie one end of the elastic to one of these little pieces, the little clip, the key clip, the other end to another one. And then the key has a hole in it. And you put these two clips separately into the hole. So the key's hole becomes a link, becomes like a part of the chain, part of the belt. It's the buckle, so to speak. They don't follow what I said, or did I not explain that clearly enough? No.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So then you're wearing the key. You're not carrying the key.
Tie clip.
Sorry?
Tie clip.
That's what they're called?
No. Tie clip
You
is
can wear
another
it as a
example.
tie clip?
Another example in which the key fits inside the tie clip. You're wearing the tie clip.
But is it an essential part of the tie clip? I can't picture how it would go into a tie clip. In the belt example that I gave, it's an essential part. In other words, if it wasn't there, the belt wouldn't close. So it's not hanging. It's actually
It's just,
has a function.
it's just like.
It has to be molded to the clip. The clip itself is attached to the key. You can't insert it in a little box like you do with a car to stick it in a thing that sticks to something. That's carrying.
Why, if it fits inside a
Yes.
part that
Well,
extends.
yeah, I would imagine.
Yes.
I can't picture in my mind something in a tie clip, so I'm not sure. But if it's something that's just sitting in there, that would be like carrying in a pocket. It's actually, it needs, so generally it has to be part of the object.
How about an ornament that you normally wear on a dress in which it forms?
So many people are lenient with ladies to where, they make like
Right.
some type of brooch out of it, because it's normal for women to wear jewelry. So that's considered normal wearing as opposed to carrying. But if a man would do the same thing, that's not really how men dress. So it would be considered carrying. So that's going to depend on the circumstances. Similar, yes, difference to men and women is with wearing watches, right? So a lot of places where there's no Erev, men don't wear watches, right? So the concern, because in other words, since most men don't wear jewelry, you wear a watch because it's functional. It's if it's not functional, person could take it off. Yes, well, not necessarily, but you could take it off. But particularly if it's a fancy.
Yeah, okay, that's jewelry then, yes.
Yeah, so then women often wear bracelets and different things. It's a wearing. Well, at least most men don't. They wouldn't wear it on Shabbos.
I once saw a belt clip where the key itself was the prong that went through the hole to hold the belt in place.
Okay,
So
especially
that was
made.
ingenious.
That would be handy. So someone's worked out how to capitalize on Shabbos observance. That's it. Next time you see a protest against community Erev, check if they're the people selling the belt clips. And by the way, I'm not cynical. All right. Gimel, number 3. The Tilas HaChovetz Makim Shel Monach. You want to pick up a place, something from where it's resting, pick up an object from where it's resting. You place a kira. This is called the kira. Kira means uprooting. So as we said before, the malacha is you have to pick it up, do the transferring, which either means going from one domain to another domain, or 4 amos, approximately 6 feet, in the public domain. And then we're going to say you need to do what they call a hanocha, for putting down. Let's just, we'll see that in the words.
Are you talking about uprooting a tree or something?
No, an object, any object. So uprooting means just pick it up. So obviously we wouldn't pick up the phone on Shabbos because it's muktzah, but pretend it's not a phone. So it's on the ground or the table or the floor. So when I pick it up, that's the akira. So
Oh. Akira, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
then there's the moving of it, either from domain to domain or the 6 feet within the public domain. And then there's the hanacha, there's the placing it back down. You need all of those factors to do the entire malacha. Right, so an example, we had this, we were speaking about, the baby is not going anywhere. And you can't just leave the baby outside, right? So, and, like I said, you try and coax the child, you wait a while if you have to, but when it gets to the point where you need to take it in, for whatever the circumstances are, if one person picked it up outside, handed it to someone else who was inside and they put it down, each person's only done half the malacha. So you shouldn't do this in the first instance, but this would be, in a situation where you're stuck. Okay, so we'll start number 3 from the beginning again. When you pick up object from wherever it's resting, nikras akira. This is called akira, uprooting. But nachas achovitz nikras hanacha. When you put it down, this is called hanacha. V'gam akira b'loy hanacha or hanacha b'loy akira asur lasos. Now, to uproot something and move it without putting it down, or to put it down when you didn't pick it up, that's also not allowed. It's also prohibited. Therefore, you can't pick something up and put it into a non-Jew's hand. For the non-Jew to take it out of the private domain to the public domain, or vice versa. Because although he's transferred it and he's put it down, but you did the first part of the malacha. So again, this is when it's not an emergency or something under normal circumstances. Because the Jew did the uprooting. So what should you do if you need something transferred? The non-Jew should pick up the object himself. Likewise, if a non-Jew brings something in, you shouldn't take it out of his hand. Because if you do that, then the Jew is completing the malacha, he's doing the putting down. Ella, rather, what should you do? The non-Jew himself should put down the object. So again, I keep using the example of babies, right? But one of my daughters just went to seminary in Yerushalayim this week. When she was about 2 months old, I was a rabbi in a summer camp, and I mistakenly thought the first Shabbos that there was an Erev. Well, what I think it was a fence. I thought the whole place was fenced in. Unfortunately, it wasn't. So there we were in the dining room, which was in one building, in this whole area, which would be a Carmelist of the camp. And we're sleeping in a different building. And it's Friday night, Shabbos has begun. And we've got a 2-month-old baby, so can't leave it in the dining room the whole Shabbos. So one of the non-Jewish kitchen staff, picked her up, took it to our building and put it down. Right. So that way, and the non-Jew did the entire malacha, the picking up, the transporting, the transferring, the transporting, and the putting down. So we weren't able to give the child picked up already into their hands, or when they came to our apartment we were staying, a little bungalow, whatever it was, we couldn't take the child from their hands and put it down. They had to put it down on the bed. So otherwise, we're doing part of the malacha, and a part malacha is prohibited as well.
Rabbi, did you have to hint around or just could you ask?
In this particular case, when we made the discovery in the middle of the meal, he was there, and he offered. So, but I think we would have been able to ask pretty much outright in that circumstances. Right, so we don't want to even do a partial malacha. Tzrichin lazar bezer betinuk shareilis noises ois lebeis knesses lamo. So we need to be careful. This, I guess, was reasonably common. We had a Jewish baby, and the bris is Shabbos, was born on Shabbos, and the bris is the next Shabbos. And we needed a non-Jew to carry it to shul for the bris. Then the non-Jewish person who's carrying the baby should pick up the child themselves in the house. And he should take to the courtyard or the lobby of the shul and put the child down. And then the Jew picks up the baby after it's been put down. So this is the reason I gave example when you could do the partial malacha for a baby. Talking about these extreme sort of situations where you're stuck somewhere with a baby and you don't have another choice. But other things, as nice it would be, if someone found a suitcase with $1 million in it. First of all, might be wise just to leave where it is anyway. You don't want the mafia coming to collect it later. But in concept, as nice it would be to be able to pick it up and take it home, and you say, well, Shabbos, I won't carry it. I'll just pick it up, walk 1 foot, put it down, pick it up 1 foot. You can't do that unless there's like a safety issue or for an object. Even though it might be nice to have done that, but we can't do that in Shabbos. Can't do a partial malacha under normal circumstances. All right, questions on that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll go to the next one. Dalet, number 4. So you have a courtyard. Now, if it's all closed in, we're not speaking about a courtyard now that's shared by multiple houses. That's going to be a slightly separate situation. But here, let's talk about, let's say, your own yard, say your backyard of your house. So it's fenced in, no problem. But here we've got a chotzer sheish bo pirza. Here now, there's a breach. There's a break in the wall. So maybe you have the front fenced in and there's a driveway that's open without a gate. Or, part of the fence fell down. Whatever happens to be. There's some type of breach. Im nisham min ha-mechitza mesad echad roichav arba tfachim gavoy asar tfachim min ha-karka. So if you have on one side of the break, it's at least 4 tfachim wide and 10 tfachim high above the ground. Or you have on both sides of the break in the wall a piece of wall still measuring 1 tefach wide, a minimum, and 10 tefachim high. So you've either got 4 tefachim breach and then the next wall without anything coming across, or you got a little bit, at least 1 tefach on each side, and so we've got these side bits, and as a im ein pirtz yois masara esa amas, and the breach is not more than 10 amas wide. So it's pretty big. It's about 15 feet. Ein tzarchim tikkun. You don't need to fix anything to be able to carry. So most driveways, well, most of them, a driveway that takes let's say a one-car driveway or something, is not a problem. If you have the entrance into the fence without a gate, again, so there's not a problem. But if it's going to be this large area, then it's going to become a problem. But if it's less, because we say this breach is just considered a doorway. Now, even though part of the fence fell down, and it's an unintentional doorway, but it's a door, no problems. But if this breach is wider than 10 amos, so you might have some people, the front yard, there's no front fence along the whole length of the property, width of the property. So they might have a side fence or whatever it is, but there's no front fence. So that would be wider than 10 amos. Or after this fence falls down, you don't have at least from the side fence coming on one direction, 4 tefachim, or both directions at least 1 tefach. So there's no even partial wall. Mikol shekain influence b'muloi. How much more so? Just the whole fence fell down. There's nothing there. B'hainu she'ein sham mechitza misad echad. So you don't have any wall at all on that side. So it just looks like a U. You've got your 3 walls, and the 4th wall is totally open. Then, as a filo im ein b'pitzurak shlosh tefachim, then once the breach is 4 tefachim, if there's no partial wall at all, asurim l'tal b'chotz you can't carry in this yard. Ad sheyasiknu ois sham, until you adjust it somehow, either put some type of partial fence or some type of gate or various things. Now the best way to fix it, once you're fixing something, make it A grade, right? So the best way to fix it is b'tzuras haPesach. Make some type of door frame. Now, a door frame doesn't have to be a wooden or metal door frame. It can even be, maybe you've seen some, temporary Erev. They put, a small piece of wood. They have a string go across the top. They'll put nails on the top of put for trees. Put the little thin stake, to hold up a young tree. So you put a stake like that with a little nail on top, and they tie a string around the nail and they run it to the next stake. So that's to close in a yard. So the yard, as we said, private domain doesn't mean it's privately owned. Private means it's fenced off. The public can't go through there. So there actually has to be 4 walls. Now the 4th wall, in any of the walls actually, there can be a breach, there can be an opening, but there has to be either a partial wall on one side that's 4 tefachim wide, or 2 small on both sides, partial wall of at least 1 tefach, and the breach can't be more than 10 amos. If the breach is more than 10 amos, or we don't have the partial walls, it's just like a U, then it's not fenced in. There's no 4 walls, and we can't carry in that area. Now, as I said, this is if it's your yard. The im darim sham shnei balibatim or yosem. But if you have in this yard 2 or more houses, then you have to make a form of Erev, with Erev Chatzeris, Yevamis Hashem b'Siman Tzadik Dalet, and chapter 94, we're going to explain that. And that is essentially the Erev that we have in our place where we live, where most people live. There's not a real Rashu Rabbin. You're not making an Erev around an area where there's 600,000 people. So an Erev in most cities is a very large Erev Tzeiros. So we'll get there. Only 12 chapters to go.
Okay, Rabbi.
We probably won't get to it today, but we'll get there.
Is that the Hashem?
Yes, we'll say that, God willing.
Definitely.
All right. Let's see, we'll do one more. Hey. This that we said, that if the breach in the wall is less than 10 amos wide, it's considered a door and you don't have to fix it. This is if there's only one breach. So in that wall, not talking about the other walls, in that wall there's only one breach. But if you've got multiple breaches, 2 or more, then the walled part of the wall has to at least equal the unwalled part, the breach. So when it's only the one breach, unless that breach is only 9 amos wide and therefore it's not a problem, maybe the whole fence is, say, only 12 amos. So the majority is breached. That's no problem because you can have one very large gate in this wall. But once you have multiple breaches, then it's, people don't normally have multiple doors in the same wall into the same area. Now, sometimes you might have along the face of a house more than one door, but it's going to a different part of the house. Here, the yard is all one big yard. You don't normally have multiple entrance ways into the one area. So therefore, it's considered more of a breach. So you have to have at least the walled part, the actual physical wall, has to at least be equal or greater than the open space in the breaches. But if the open spaces are greater, say, if the breaches are greater area than the actual wall, and a breach means at least 3 tefachim, right? So the wall doesn't have to be airtight. You don't have to coat it with cement and paint it and keep it airtight. You can have even the wooden fences, some have slats and there's little gaps. But as long as the gap is less than 3 tefachim, then it doesn't count. So, but once the breaches are more than 3 tefachim, if they're more than the actual walled part, you have to fix something there in order to be able to carry on Shabbos. All right, any questions on that? Silence, as we recall from one of the earlier classes, said when there's no questions, one of 3 things. 1, it was also clear everyone's got everything. 2, it was so unclear, no one has any idea what we're talking about, so no one to ask. Or 3, it was so boring, no one was paying attention to ask a question. So I'm really getting worried when there's no questions. Okay. Everyone's going to go home.
Maybe
you run outside and check the.
I have a question. Where
Yes.
where do I find all this information online?
Well, I think the actual book is online. You can. There's I think Chabad.org has it, or Safaria. Is there
An English translation?
Yeah,
That's what
I'm sure.
Safaria
English translation.
Yeah, there is.
Online. I'm pretty sure Chabad.org has this whole book Hebrew and
Okay.
English online on the website.
All right.
We mean the Shulchan Aruch?
The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch,
Yeah, you can get on
It's on-
Safari. Yes.
Safaria.com, but also I think, and also Chabad.org, so you can have look at any of them. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I think once in a while, it's important to remind us what's the verse in the Torah that this is connected with. Like one verse, two verses, just to refresh our memory.
Well, this one. Okay. So we, all right. So we're actually going to have it in the next part. So we'll. It's already after 1, so we'll get to that. Well, whatever time it is for you, but it's after hours, so we'll have that after.
After 3.
Okay. So we'll wish everyone an amazing Shabbos, and
You too, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you,
you
Rabbi.
too. Take care.
Thank
Good
you,
day.
Rabbi.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
Shabbos.
Okay. Ciao.
All right.
Shabbos,
to you
everybody.
too.